Hi, friends. This is Adam Shoemaker, Rector at St. Stephen's Episcopal Church in downtown Charleston, back for another edition of Rector's Corner. And I'm very happy to have with me today our outgoing Associate Rector, Will Berry. We are recording this on his last official day as a member of the St. Stephen's staff before he begins his new ministry as Rector of St. James on James Island. Will, I know life is busy for you. Thank you for making the time for this conversation. But wonder if we could just begin by having you talk a little bit about what attracted you to St. James.
Yeah, absolutely. Um, First, I have to acknowledge that it feels like yesterday we were doing this when I was coming on to staff. It was probably exactly around 3 years ago this time. So it's pretty wild to see how things come full circle so fast. I when I came to St. Stephen's, I had been a priest in charge, which, for those who don't know, is sort of a limited time contract rector position, for lack of a better phrase. And after my contract was up, decided to explore the possibility of being an associate again, and was really drawn to St. Stephen's and its identity as a house of prayer for all people. And so then, of course, I got to St. Stephen's and loved my time. But pretty shortly in, we went under construction, and our campus relocated, our offices relocated to St. James. And really, from the time I think we started having our offices there, I really just fell in love with the campus, with the community there, with their story as a returning congregation in the diocese. St. Stephen's was kind of a bulwark during the schismatic years, and has always remained, tried and true to who they are. St. James experienced a split. And so they returned about 3 years ago after the lawsuits were kind of coming to an end, and really are, in some ways, an old but new congregation, just like the diocese is an old but startup diocese. They've been worshiping on that property since 1722 was the
Wow.
first time. They've had 8 or 9 church buildings, some of which were destroyed in fires, in hurricanes, during the Civil War. Someone accidentally set the church on fire. Um, it's had a it's had a long run. Actually, the first rector there was the rector of St. Andrews, Old St. Andrews, and St. James was a chapel of ease for that community. And so he would paddle down the Ashley River once a month in the early 1700s. It's pretty wild, but to hold service there. So I just became really, fascinated by their story. Um, in seminary, the kind of work I was really drawn to was congregational development and revitalization. My teacher for that is a mutual friend of ours, Traywin Malone, from the Diocese of North Carolina, and he really gave me a passion for seeing congregations as living organisms that, are at different stages in their life cycle. And so for me, this just seemed like a really unique opportunity to partner with a congregation that is kind of starting over again, but that has, a long established presence in the community. And to take what I think is all the amazing gifts I've been offered at St. Stephen's, the gift of being part of a family friendly service, the gift of being part of a church that is, radically welcoming and involved and engaged in the community, and to kind of take that spirit that I've kind of been incubated in at St. Stephen's and to help bring that to St. James, and to help them sort of move in a new life-giving direction for them as they kind of take these next steps.
Yeah, well, thank you for sharing a little bit of the colorful history here in the Diocese of South Carolina. We
Yeah.
certainly do have a lot of congregations that have long histories and pretty incredible stories. As you begin to prepare to start your ministry there, I wonder, Will, what you see as the challenges and the opportunities of where St. James finds themselves in right now.
Yeah, that's a great question. I think one of their opportunities is also a challenge. They have a very large property.
Mhm.
It's kind of funny at St. Stephen's, we have a lot of people, but a pretty small space. Um, the opposite is true at St. James. So they have this pretty substantial property, but are still kind of building up their numbers. And so, the property includes an amazing fellowship space. They call it the St. James Center. It includes pretty new and updated classrooms, nursery facilities. There's even a preschool, a day school on campus. Um, there's a marsh out back that flows into Ellis Creek. There's an outdoor chapel. They own a little over, I think, 11 or 12 acres of property out there. There's a very large cemetery. They have a croquet field that they built out there. And so it's a lot. It's a lot of real estate to manage, to care for. Like every church property I've ever been involved on, it needs a little TLC and some love, and it's a great asset, but it's also something that will inevitably be challenging, as certainly St. Stephen's and everywhere else has to face the challenge of managing aging properties. Um, but it's also a real asset and a real opportunity. And I think there's a deep desire in the congregation to not just grow, but I think grow for the right reasons, to say much again, I mean, there's a lot of parallels here, much like we're saying at St. Stephen's right now. How can we leverage the space we have for the sake of our neighbors? And so it's not just how do we build this nice little campus just for us, but how do we use this space to invest in and to bless the community around us. They have a beautiful commercial grade kitchen that I
Mhm.
think has a lot of opportunity for outreach and mission. They have a concert space with stage and lights and sound booth and all that stuff, which I think could get involved in community theater. And I know they're already involved in local choirs. And I think the biggest asset there right now is just that the people who are there are really invested in being there. They want to be the Episcopal Church on James Island, and so I think their sense of identity is very clear. And so I think it's an exciting time for me to come in and to say, okay, so what does that mean? What does it mean to be the Episcopal Church on James Island, and what does that look like? And how can we leverage our resources for the sake of that ministry?
Yeah, oh, the campus and facilities are incredible. And alongside the Episcopal worshiping community across the street from you at Bishop Gadsden, you are at St. James, the Episcopal presence on James Island. And that strikes me as a tremendous mission field.
It is, in James Island, much like the rest of the Charleston area, has undergone growth and development. Its growth and development has been a little slower than, say, John's Island, where we live. It's been a lot more rapid out here. But there's a lot of young families, a lot of young professionals. There's a lot of schools, middle schools, elementary schools, preschools, a couple high schools. And so it's really, I think, a rich opportunity to be the only Episcopal church there on the island. And to your point, yeah, we do have, we're another asset we have is that we're directly across the street from Bishop Gadsden, our Episcopal retirement community. And At one time, that land was actually owned by St. James, and the congregation gifted it. So we have a very close relationship with that community. St. Stephen's and St. James both have some parishioners there. The chaplain there, Charles Jenkins, is a friend and colleague, and I'm excited to kind of build the relationship over there as well. But their chapel really serves the residents there. And so, anyone else really on James Island, I mean, we're pretty much the game in town, so to speak. So it's exciting to kind of have that clarity of, we are the Episcopal Church on James Island, and to hopefully let that be sort of something that draws people in. Yeah.
Well, I wonder, Will, as you get started, what your hope is for St. James. Perhaps a more realistic question might be, what is your hope maybe for year one as you get your feet on the ground there?
Yeah, that's a great question. In some ways, I am functioning my first year both as kind of a rector and as an interim
Mm,
rector, because in a traditional search process, you would have a rector leave, and then you would have an interim rector who would take time to say, okay, here's where we've been.
mhm,
Um, Here's how we see ourselves, and then here's where we want to go.
mhm,
And because it's a returning church and has only been back for 3 years, it just didn't make sense to do that for them. And so I'm kind of functioning as both. So my first year, I'm hoping to really just get to know the community better, to help them listen and discern their gifts and their passions for ministry, because as a priest, you never want to try to lead people in a direction that they're just not excited about. And so to, yeah, get to know their gifts and their passions. And yeah, to do that deep listening, to start doing that visioning work. We're going to be working a little bit with Anne Fleming, our canon for congregational vitality, who I know is also doing some work with St. Stephen's and St. Peter's and some of our other returning congregations. And to do that work of saying, okay, what are our values? What is our vision? And what concrete steps, what strategies can we create to live into that? Because I think growth is always intentional. And if you want to grow, then you have to know what values are guiding that growth. And then you have to have some strategies in place that line up with those values. I mean, I know for St. Stephen's, when you were called, Adam, I mean, it was very clear that one of the priorities was to invest in young families and children. And I think in a very similar way, that will be one of my priorities there as well. Because in my experience, as I know in your experience, that's the future of the church, is to help make space for the next generations.
mhm.
And I think that's something pretty much from the get-go I'm going to be working on, is, intentionally inviting, young families, young professionals, creating space for children and youth. They do have Sunday school, they do have nursery available, so all the things they need are in place. I think there just needs to be a bigger targeted invitation, and then working with the congregation to help them invite people that they know, friends and family and all that. So that's really how I kind of see the first year, as kind of laying the groundwork for that. And then the next, you know, 5 years kind of enacting that vision, because it takes a while.
Yep, you have to be patient, but I completely agree with you. I certainly think that's a sensible priority, not just for St. James, but should be a priority for every congregation in our diocese. Will, we are having this conversation, of course, during Holy Week. This will come out on Holy Wednesday,
Mm.
You will begin your ministry at St. James, observing the Triduum liturgies, and I wonder what you might say could be the significance of that. It's an interesting time to begin a new ministry.
Yeah, it is. So originally, with this timeline, because their previous rector, Taylor, left in early January, they were really hoping that their new priest could start on Easter.
Mhm.
And I was talking to our friend, the Reverend Michael Schaefer, and I was talking to him about this. And he said, he said, when I was coming to St. Mark's, they also invited me to start on Easter. Um, but he said, you know what? I told them I don't want to skip to just the good part. He
Hmm.
said, if we're gonna do Easter, I want to walk through Holy Week with you all. And when he said that, I was like, wow, that's really powerful. And so I talked with the bishop and the vestry, and I said, what if I just did the whole weekend and start Monday, Thursday, Good Friday, and then do Easter? And I think it is. I mean, it's a beautiful way to enter into the life of a community. It sounds weird to say, but I mean, I love Holy Week. I think it's a
Mhm.
really special time. It's a really holy and a sacred time. And to get the chance to get to know a community that way and to walk through what is, one of the most powerful and impactful seasons of the church year, um, is a pretty awesome way to kind of dig into things. And it's also just my personality where I tend to jump into things anyway. So I think it fits in that aspect too, for sure.
That's great. That's great. Well, Will, I wonder how we at St. Stephen's and anybody else in the diocese who is listening to this conversation might be supportive of you and your ministry and the people of St. James.
Yeah, thanks. One thing I just have to say I love about this diocese that I have not experienced in as much in other places in the Episcopal Church is that this is a really collaborative diocese. And
Mhm.
it never feels to me that we are, as clergy, as congregations, are in competition with each other. It feels like we are always wanting to do stuff together, which is awesome. And I know when we were on St. James's campus, we had some joint events, we had some joint activities. And so, one of the ways I think folks could consider is, yeah, what kind of good trouble could we get involved in together? Whether that's, marching together with the diocese in the Pride Parade, or going to something like the Nehemiah Action at the Charleston Area Justice Ministry, or having joint events where we bring speakers in. Of course, the best way anyone can be supportive is as corny as it is to pray, to send good thoughts, as we begin this journey together. But to also just continue that spirit of collaboration that I think is so prevalent in this diocese, and that I have just been amazed to see.
Yeah, well, and if we're going to do group events, certainly occasionally having them at St. James, some listening might remember that we had our diocesan convention at the St. James Center because you have not only tremendous facilities, but as rector of St. Stephen's, I can look with envy at your tremendous parking as well.
The park.
It's a tremendous, tremendous resource that you have there.
It is. And yeah, and to figure out again how we can share that resource for our congregation friends in the area. Absolutely.
Well, Will, I know we've had a celebration for you and prayed you off in worship, but I wonder, as you conclude your ministry, are there any final words that you would like to offer to the community of St. Stephen's?
Oh my gosh, so many. You know, say, and I try to explain this to people. I mean, the spirit of St. Stephen's, the joy, the engagement, the creativity, the genuine hospitality is really unmatched. It's really an amazing community. And I think for me, having had the chance, to come back from having been an associate, years ago to having had that chance again and to be somewhere where I think I always just felt accepted and loved, and my family. I feel like everyone just embraced our family, our son. Um, yeah, I can't ever speak enough to just the quality of the people at St. Stephen's. And for me as a priest, at the end of the day, I mean, that is what ministry is all about. It's about the people and the relationships. And I have been so fortunate to have spent time at St. Stephen's. And another thing I have to say that I think helps St. Stephen's, that is wisdom for any congregation looking to move into vitality, is that St. Stephen's has a very clear sense of who it is. And that sense of identity, that sense of mission, um, in my mind and experience is what drives the vitality that we see at St. Stephen's on Sunday mornings. And so, it's been amazing to be somewhere that knows who it is, that's willing to show up exactly how it wants to, and I think really have an impact not only on the Diocese of South Carolina, but I think the Charleston area as a whole. So it's really been a blessing and a privilege to have spent time with St. Stephen's, and I look forward to still seeing people out in the community, and in a couple years figuring out what kind of good trouble we can get into together, what kind of collaborations we can do. So yeah, it's been an amazing experience, and the way that the congregation invests in their clergy, I think whoever down the line would come potentially to fill my position, or however that works out. I mean, I think it is a very um, attractive and also life-giving experience, and so I'm excited for whoever steps in next and can experience all the amazing gifts and blessings that we've experienced in our time at St. Stephen's.
Well, thank you, Will, for your faithfulness and for your service to our congregation. We're proud of you, and proud as I've noted to the congregation that you make the third St. Stephen's priest in recent years who is now leading another institution of the diocese. And our prayers go with you and your family, and we wish you well. And we know you're not going far away, so we will run into you all from time to time. Bless you, and thank you to those who've listened in to this conversation. I'll be back next month for another edition of Rector's Corner. In the meantime, friends, you stay safe and well, and you keep the faith. Take care, everybody.